Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I'm Kathy Gruver, and we are so excited to have another guest on, a very dear friend of mine. I've known her for a while now. One of my favorite people, Nicole Garrett. Woohoo! Hey, Nicole, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Good. So why don't you tell everyone who you are, what you do, how you got to this point, all that good stuff, and we'll launch from there.
All right. Well, as you said, I'm Nicole Garrett, and I'm a presentation skills coach. And I started this business a couple years ago, and I'll give you the background as quickly and efficiently as I can. I spent my teenage years and most of my adult life immersed in the performing arts. I earned a degree in theater. I worked as a professional actress and singer, and I became a director and an educator. And long story short, I moved out west. I came out west for a show, and then I wound up staying here. And then I basically traveled, living out west from gig to gig, because I found myself in Jackson Hole and not being able to work as an artist in Jackson Hole. And I was on the road working a lot, and somebody called me to come back to Jackson Hole and direct a show. And I met my husband, and the man who's now my husband, and was also really fortunate that two of my friends, Broadway musicians, were living out here, and I was able to work with them. And all of that came to a grinding halt just a couple years into my marriage, when my accompanist developed a glioblastoma, and he died of brain cancer. Yeah. And I literally found myself at a crossroads. Here I was as an artist living in Jackson Hole with no one to really work with. So fast forward a couple months, I went to New York with my husband. He works in tech, and I attended a conference with him. And I went to a couple of the presentations, and I was sitting in the audience of these presentations, and I found myself diving into my bag and pulling out a notebook and a pen and taking notes feverishly on everything the presenter was doing that I could have helped him do better. And I walked out of the building that day, and I said to my husband, I have found my next chapter. And I am not kidding you. The doors literally flew open that day. I reached out to a friend. I told him about my new career change. And he said, oh, you got to call this person in New York and this person. And I did. And I met with him like that week, and everything just unfolded. And here we are today. The rest is history.
Well, it's funny when you say that, right? Because I mean, all of us are speakers. And I remember that, you reaching in your bag, pulling out your notebook and starting to take notes. It's like, when we're sitting in conferences, right? If you're a speaker, you take notes, but it's not the same notes everybody else is taking, right? And so it's like, you can look around, right? And it's like, okay, those are the people that are here to learn.
Yeah.
And there's another one, right? Because we're taking notes about different things at different times, like, I liked how he brought that story into it. Oh, that was good imagery. Oh,
that was a really strong cross, right?
Yeah, that was really great.
Stop flipping your hair. Flipping your hair. Why are you reading your PowerPoint?
Will you stop with the disfluencies already? If I hear another no.
Oh, there's a great callback, to something that was at the beginning, right? So it's interesting, and it's it's a fascinating business anyway, right? So I mean, it's great that, like you said, the doors just flew open for you.
Yeah.
When you decided that that's what you needed to do, right? And so, whew.
Yeah.
Well, and what's so funny is, first of all, I love all the pivots. You find yourself at that crossroads, and you're like, and you just being open to the next thing and finding yourself in a completely, seemingly unrelated situation, made the choice of, I know what I'm going to do. And what's funny is, I sat in a conference in Vegas my very first like big conference for naturopaths, and I was taking notes on the content, and then this woman was speaking, and I was like, what does she do? And I started taking on one side of the paper, I'd take notes on her, and on the other side of the paper, I took notes on the content. And I had the exact same thought as you, except I turned to my friend next to me and went, I should be up there doing that.
Wow.
So even though I was a director, I was an act, we have the same, I've got a BFA in theater, you know, we kind of went the same route on that. I looked up there and went, I want to get up there. And you said, I want to fix that. So I love that we sat in the pretty much the same situation.
Yeah.
And looked at it from two different perspectives. I absolutely love that. So the three of us were on stage. We know what we're doing. You coach people to do that. I coach people to do that. Jason's the best speaker in the world.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
I've never seen him actually speak, but I don't know. But
it's funny because, you know, my background has been in such technical areas, internal audit, risk management, compliance, really sexy, exciting things, right? So, so you go to those conferences and it is literally,
Those are
people,
sexy and exciting things, by the way.
People read. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad somebody, I'm just trying to bring the sexy to those areas, right? Because most of the time it's just somebody. I know, and all of a sudden, you know, Justin's going in my head anyway. All right, here we go. But but it's so boring most of the time because it's like listening to a professor give a lecture, and now on the next slide we have blah blah blah, right? And that's not how people learn too, right? And so again, it's that whole idea of bringing something that's different to actually help people learn and actually connect with them as a human, that so many people that are speakers don't actually do. They're talkers, they're not speakers.
So interesting to hear you say that. I mean, even this week, I have worked with 3 new clients who are clearly so in their head about the content and what they're going to say that they don't understand the importance of the relationship with the audience and connecting with the audience and speaking with the audience and listening to the audience. And I find time and time again, that really is where a big roadblock occurs, that they are caught up so much in what do I say? How good is it going to be? It has to be perfect, that they're missing the point that your audience is 50% of the conversation that you're having. And without them, there's no presentation to be had.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, and this is why I've had people say, how do you memorize that whole thing? Okay, I don't memorize it. I'm telling stories.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what order I do it in, unless, you know, I start a story and then I turn the PowerPoint on and it's the wrong slide. But it's like, use the PowerPoint as a key to get you to the next thing. But I remember standing, you know, I was in speaker training, which was ridiculous because I knew more than the woman teaching it, but I was in speaker training and this woman memorized her talk word for word. And when I've seen people memorize word for word as if it's a term paper, it ends up being a nightmare because they get to a certain and they can't remember their line.
Well, like, it's not like in acting where you can go line and you do the retake, right?
You want a story. I mean, I remember a woman having to read, I went to nursing school in 1992 to 19. It's like, you don't know where you went. Put the paper down, you know? So there's, you know, all these tips and things that we could do. What are the biggest pitfalls after the getting in your own head thing? What are the biggest pitfalls you see with people who need to be speakers or want to be speakers that you help with?
If I'm thinking right now, just from my experience this week, working with people who are working in corporate or executive directors working in nonprofits, actually, it is the lack of preparation. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, there are a couple of people who way over prepare, right? Like you said, memorizing a word for word, line for line. But that lack of preparation, when you don't have a lot of experience standing up in front of a group of people, I think can really actually cause trouble for the speaker. You know, someone like you, Kathy, who it's what you do. You speak to audiences, so you've got that ingrained in you, and it's a natural part of you. But with people that don't have a lot of experience, I don't think they understand. It's not that you have to, you know, work for 10, 12 hours on a 3-minute presentation, but understanding how to prepare properly for it. And that really is dependent on the person who's giving the presentation, I think.
So for how do you prepare proper? I mean, pick a random person. How would you recommend they prepare for a 3-minute presentation?
Good question. It's a random person. Let's see here. One of the people that I worked with yesterday has a 3-minute pitch, really terrified of public speaking, but is taking chances and doing it. Has her material laid out in front of her, right? Okay, that's how she has prepared. I don't want to take that away from her. At the same time, we spent time having her focus on, again, who are you talking to? What are you saying to them? How are you connecting with them? Right? And I found in her content, it was very intellectual. Studies show data. Where's, like you said, where's the story in this?
Yeah.
What is the way you connect? So that's how we started preparing to look at this. Okay, so you've got 3 minutes. Can you tell a story here? Can you throw in some data? And can you talk to your audience? Another thing that comes up for me as you say that is I feel very strongly with people that don't have a lot of experience with presentations is they've got to get connected to their why and to their own intrinsic values as to what it is they're talking about and what about it is important to them, and conveying that to their audience, authentically.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I'm so glad you said that. I go to so many conferences because I'm speaking at them. There's a hypnotherapy conference, and there was this woman who I read the description of what she was talking about. And I went, oh my God, this sounds incredible. I want to go see this.
Yeah.
A friend of mine and I, we walk into the room. It is packed. People are shoved in this room that should hold 30 people. There's like 80 people. People are sitting on the floor, and we're like, oh, okay. So we plop down on the floor in the aisle, and we're watching. She has an hour and a half to do her talk. She spent the first 25 minutes talking about how she grew up and she was so rich and she had all these things. And I'm looking at my friend and we're both like, and I finally wrote to him verbal masturbation, and I handed over the piece of paper. I'm like, and we finally both went, we left. It was so hard, but we looked around the room and people were like, they were enthralled with this. And I finally said to him, why is she telling us this?
Yes.
And I tell so many stories in my talks, and it's not because I'm so great and I'm so funny. I am funny. I am great. That's not why I'm telling you the story.
Yes, you are.
I'm telling you the story because there's a lesson to it, because it leads you to, this is the stress technique that I'm teaching you. And so I encourage people to say, why are you telling me this? Why are you telling me this story? Why are you giving me that data? And to your point of knowing the audience, that is so huge. If I'm speaking to 911 dispatchers, I'm going to tell slightly different stories than if I'm speaking to single moms, than if I'm speaking to health and safety guys. If I have a room full of all men, I'm using my football metaphors. I'm not talking about the airy fairy hug it out, sing kumbaya stuff. I'm making it more practical. So I think, knowing your audience and asking yourself, why are you telling this? I think those are two huge key points. I love it.
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about like 3-minute deals, right? And this is where maybe comes back to the preparation and some of what you saw with that lady spending 25 minutes talking about herself, right? Is, Brian Tracy told me a long time ago, and this was, kind of a funny thing, right? But he's, talking with somebody and they're like, well, so what do you want me to do? Well, we want you to do a 10-minute talk. Okay, well, that's going to cost X amount and I can do it in 2 weeks, right? Well, what if we hired you to do a 1 hour? Oh, okay, well, it would be this amount. Maybe a little less, right? And gets down to, well, hey, I want you for a whole day. Well, shit, we can start right now, kind of thing, because the tighter you are in your time, the more preparation you actually have to have, right? So, I mean, it's the same thing. If somebody hires me to come in for a day, I don't have to prepare too much, right? I can, there's a lot of stuff you can do. There's breaks, there's all exercises, all kinds of other stuff, right? But if somebody wants me for an hour, right, I might spend 5 or 8 hours preparing for a 1 hour speech, especially if it's a one that I haven't done before, right? And again, it's that preparing who's the audience going to be, when do I want to try to use which stories, why am I trying to use those stories? what emotion am I trying to get them to feel, right? And how am I going to weave this all together so that at the end of the hour, I get them to take the action or do whatever it is, my why behind why I'm actually talking, right?
Yeah.
And so, where you had that lady for an hour and a half, she's probably thinking, well, geez, I've only got a half an hour worth of content. So I'm going to spend the first half hour telling them about
Talking
me.
about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unprepared. Well, she didn't have anything to
That
say.
happens time and time again too.
Yeah, well, it's true. It could have been a 10-minute talk.
Yeah.
And because it was an hour and a half, she's like, oh, I guess I have to BS my way through. And the fact that people were enthralled by that, I found appalling. And I actually talked to the organizer about it. And he goes, yeah, you're not the only person that complained about that. And she never spoke there again because she wasn't giving us anything of value.
Right.
It was weird. Okay, so know your why, prepare, don't over prepare, don't under prepare.
Yeah, you actually, and you reminded me of something else. Yesterday I had someone else that I worked with who has to do a 10-minute presentation in front of a board quarterly. And they were feeling all this pressure because they have to say this and this and this and this and get all of this content in, right? And this is one of our first times working together. And I said, well, what would it look like if you had 3 points to make? Not 20, 3. And just considered that less is actually more. And it was kind of a mind-blowing, thought of, wow, really?
Especially since people like threes, right? There's a psychological reason for this too.
3's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one joke where 4 is funny, which I won't tell because it's very dirty. But
oh, okay. Well, after the call.
After the call. So, Nicole, as you came up as a performer, and what was your biggest? What was the note you always got? What was your biggest foible when you were either performing or speaking? Like, what was your block with it?
Don't push.
Ah.
Yeah, don't push. I was absolutely one who tried really hard because I wanted to do a good job and I wanted it to be perfect. And when I remember in college getting busted by my teacher, I did this monologue and I was literally standing, I wound up standing on a chair, emoting to the world. And I got off the chair. He's like, how was that for you? And it was in that moment that he really kind of, stripped away that wall and the vulnerability came out. And that's when I realized, oh, this is what performing is about. It's vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's honest.
Well, so I want to dig in on that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are talking about authenticity as well, right? And so again, you see this from a kind of from a speaking standpoint too, right? When you put up that wall, when you're trying so hard, especially if you're trying to be someone else, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times we'll try to emulate somebody else, but it's not us, right? And so again, the audience can tell that's not really authentic. That's not really who Jason is, right? Which is why I do things a lot different. I bring in pop culture and musical references and other stuff just because that's who I am, right? I wear colorful shirts. I always wear a hat, doing different things like that is just me. But, you can look at it even too, like, and I think that's kind of where you're getting at too, with this, don't push, don't try too hard as far as just be yourself. Right. And so again, you can see if we go back into the, actor realm, there's certain actors that are just really fucking good at certain roles. Why?
Yeah.
Because that's who they are.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Liam Neeson. Yeah. He does really good at a particular kind of role.
He's a gentleman with particular skills.
He's someone with particular skills.
Yeah.
When he tries to do a different role, it's not the same.
It's
right.
Not.
Because you look at it and you're like, come on, dude, really? No, you're the rough and tumble badass guy, right? And so when he tries to play maybe a character that doesn't really fit who we see him as, something just doesn't click. And so it's the same thing when you're a speaker, right? Is
Oh,
You've got to speak the way that you are kind of authentically as well, and not try to fit yourself in some box
yes.
because that's what people tell you you have to do.
Yeah. And so much of that is perception. Because when I got my PhD, I changed my headshot to very corporate looking. And all of my stuff was very, I'm going to be going into corporations, so I must be I can't use my bad language and I must be very stilted in my speech, and somebody said, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, you're hilarious and you're slightly irreverent. And like, yeah, you can do this very, hi, I'm here in a suit to be corporate, but that's not you. And they don't want anybody, they want you to come in and do that thing. And I remember when I started putting the red streaks in my hair, my then husband, now ex-husband, goes, oh, well, that's going to look real professional. And I went, what? And he goes, if you're going into major corporations to get paid well and you've got red streaks in your hair, what are they going to think? And I said, they are going to think that I'm a cool badass and that I'm going to teach them stuff that, but I had to get out of that, the perception of, oh, geez, I'm a corporate speaker now, I must do this certain, no. They can see who I am on my website. They can see that I'm goofy. They can see that I'm fun, that's what they want. That's what they hired me for. So you have to know, stay in your lane and just be true to yourself.
So I have a question for you. Then, when you made that decision, that conscious choice, how did it land for you? Did it take a while, or did you just sink right in?
Oh, it was a sink right in, because it was a misperception. It was what I thought other people were going to, how I thought other people were going to respond to what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I realized they don't care, because I have some friends who are speakers who have shaved, they have the sides shaved and they have all these crazy colors. And they, I think about Phil Gerbicek, who is he's always wears the crazy glasses, or Brian Farno, who's from Pittsburgh, who everything's black and yellow because of the Steelers. And, it's like everybody has their thing that they like to do, and you have to be authentic to yourself and be vulnerable. I love that you said vulnerable, because when I do you're opening yourself up on stage, and I tell so many personal stories. Some are very emotionally weighted depending on the talk that I'm giving. Yeah. And there's been times where I've teared up on stage and everyone's like, oh, you can't cry. It's like, sure I can, because I take the audience on that journey with me. And if I start to tear up and I take that moment, they're all mesmerized. If it's authentic. I can't manufacture that. Ooh, I'm going to cry now. You guys better come with me. Is everyone crying?
The eye drops. Here we go.
Onions backstage. Yeah. So how do you tap into that vulnerability and that honesty?
How do I personally, or tap into it for them?
How do you get people there? Because that's scary for people.
It is scary for people. I really, really try to create as safe a space as possible from the get-go. And some people jump right into the work and are willing to let go. And other people, it takes a while. So it's a matter of, I think that's where the Coactive Institute has really been helpful in working with people, because it is giving them, it's holding that space for them to step into their vulnerability, and trust that they're not going to be judged by doing it. Right.
But what if I mess up?
We're going to mess up.
Yeah. What if you mess up? What if it's not perfect? What if you lean into the fear of not being perfect and do it anyway? What if? What might happen?
I might die.
Okay. You might.
I've never been to a conference though, right? Where they take the horn, the shepherd's hook, and like
pull you off or
boo somebody off, and then you hear a gunshot in the back. It's like,
you suck.
That didn't happen.
It's there actually is a lot of work that I do with clients, some clients that have that fear of not being good enough or being judged. That's the saboteur work, and taking that saboteur that's in your head and putting a face and a body on it and sticking it in the room and having a conversation with it.
Yeah.
And letting it know that it needs to be quiet. It needs to take a time out because you've got work to do.
Well, and here's what I've noticed. when someone is trying really hard and being vulnerable and they screw it up, something happens and you can see them suddenly going, uh, the audience is so compassionate for that.
Yes.
When I see the audience go, is
Yeah.
when you're an arrogant, overconfident prick about what you're doing. That's when the audience goes, I'm out. You can see them shut down.
Yeah.
When you are trying your best and something gets screwed up, the audience is right there with you going, oh, I'm rooting for you. You got this, you know. So yeah, failing is not the screwing up's not the problem. It's being overly confident, unprepared, and kind of being a jerk about it is when the audience rebels. That's been my observation.
Yeah, I think, but that ties me back to preparation. It's like, well, how are you preparing? Are you doing your research? Are you getting to know your audience? Because I always assume that if people have that arrogance about them, it's a mask for fear. And it's the fear of the judgment that they might receive from the audience. But when you spend time imagining your audience, just imagining them, imagining what their life is like. What side of the bed do they get out of in the morning? What newspapers might they read? What is their social media influence? Where are their vulnerable points? It helps the speaker, I think, have more empathy for the audience. Because, I mean, at least for me, I realize, you know what? They're human beings too, and they're having a human experience, and they're vulnerable also. Yeah. And if I'm willing to stand in my vulnerability, maybe it will create a space for them to stand in theirs. And then the world becomes a better place.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to ask you a question, you know, because we've been talking a lot of the analogy or kind of stuff that we've been going along is kind of platform speaking too, right? But I heard you mention something about working with executives and boards. Yeah. Space I know all too well, right? Having to stand up in front of the boards, going in every quarter. You know, and we were joking about, you know, you're not going to die, but in that corporate political landmine environment, you might not die, but you could lose your job. I mean, there's a real chance if you go in, you totally fuck it up, you could lose your job, right? You could lose the confidence of the board, the other executives, and there's a whole, you know, political dynamic to it, especially in a lot of those situations where people will make certain comments or do other things to try to undermine you. So I'm interested too, as far as, you know, when you're coaching executives on this, are there maybe some different things that you're working with them on or to kind of consider that might be different than a platform speaker?
I'm censoring
and the answer
myself,
can be no, but
don't censor yourself.
No, I just want to protect confidentiality and make sure.
Oh, shit,
yeah.
This is not a direct yes or no for me. This is about my client getting clearly aligned with their values, their personal values that they honestly have, and the values that they have that they uphold for this company, and being clear about those, and then coming forward with their message from that place of leadership and trusting. And yes, you are risking, but when we really know who we are and we come forward with courage and authenticity, if that board doesn't agree with what's happening there, maybe
it's not a good fit.
It's not a good fit. No. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I totally agree, because again, you know, I look at it from a leadership perspective. I love where you went with that, because I hadn't thought of that directly, but it's people with conviction that are going to be heard. And again, you know, like you said, your conviction may differ from other people in the organization, but honestly, there's a lot of weasels and weak people in very high positions in corporations that just are, you know, got the term yes man, that just kind of go along, and that's not leadership. You know, that's just being a
Puppet.
whiny little bitch puppet kind of thing, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like, having that, because again, a lot of the executives I deal with, sometimes they have to deliver difficult messages to executives, and it doesn't go over well. I mean, I try to help them, make it easier, but it is, I think what you said, it's that alignment with your values and your conviction and actually speaking the message. I mean, you can soften it a little bit, but sometimes we just got to tell the hard truth. Sometimes the messenger is the one who gets shot, but that comes with the territory,
You just reminded me of a story. May I share it? It's quick.
Yeah.
My father, when he was alive, he was the director of a university in Illinois, not U of I, SIU Edwardsville. And there, I was young, but something had happened where he was asked by his bosses to go in front of the board and lie. And my father was a man of deep integrity. And he felt a ton of pressure about it. And he decided that he would comply because he feared losing his job. And he walked in to work. If I remember the story accurately, he walked in, he was walking up the steps of the building to go to this meeting, and he had a heart attack. And he didn't make it. And he didn't have to tell the story, right? He didn't have to tell the lie.
Wow.
But that, to me, affirms the importance of honoring your values in any type of presentation.
Yeah.
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 That's a powerful story.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's also going to be
It
our
makes
last
sense.
one, because once again, we're out of time.
I
I
know.
know. I could see you. See, and there was vulnerability in telling that story because I was starting to tear up with you.
Mm.
I know,
All
but
right.
it's I see
Beautiful.
that so much in corporate America, and it's we've got to stick to the values at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Yeah. And we've talked about that so much, Jason and I. We've done episodes on values. We've talked about our values. It's huge. That informs everything. That informs everything. This has been such a great conversation. Nicole, you're one of my favorite people.
You're one of my favorite people. And Jason, I'm so glad to have met you. You're one of my new favorite people.
Yay. Cool. All right, Nicole, tell people where they can reach you, your websites, anything you have that you want to share with people.
Yes. My business is called Present. My website is www.present.llc. And you can reach me at nicole@present.llc.
Woohoo.
Yeah,
Yay.
and I live in Jackson Hole. So if you're ever out in Jackson Hole, just look me up. I'll take you hiking.
Oh, I'm there. Absolutely.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm ready. Excellent. Oh, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being here. I am Kathy Gruver. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.